Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. The Harry Potter films have often been criticized for leaving out many important details that were so vital to the original atmosphere. This was especially noticeable with Order of the Phoenix, the longest book in the series turned into the shortest adaptation. Perhaps realizing this misstep, the creators of the final part chose to split the last novel into 2 films, starting a trend that Twilight, The Hunger Games, and other popular franchises later joined. Some events were cut entirely, others were heavily altered, and there were also scenes created specifically for the movies. Let's take a closer look at the most memorable of these. Enjoy watching. Number 1. Voldemort destroys the protective charms. In the book, Hogwarts' defenses were much more understated and lacked any showy visual effects. There were no giant magical barriers shimmering above the castle. The filmmakers chose to add a grand scene to heighten the drama. In Deathly Hallows Part 2, we see Voldemort silently unleashing a powerful spell on the invisible dome. With a thunderous crash, the barrier breaks and his wand cracks at the same moment. It symbolically hints that the coming battle's outcome will be far from certain. Number 2. The bridge explosion. In the book, the mention of Neville and the Resistance fighting on the bridge is brief and easy to miss. The film, however, expands this moment into a full-blown, suspenseful action scene. Viewers watch as Neville, Ginny, and Seamus prepare the explosives. After a quick exchange with McGonagall, they blow the entire span, foiling the Death Eater's plans. It's a tense, cinematic moment, even if it raises questions about the number of casualties. Number 3. Harry and Snape's confrontation. In the adaptation, Harry returns to Hogwarts to find the remaining Horcruxes and steps out in front of everyone in the Great Hall to face Snape directly. He challenges him, condemns his actions, and brazenly accuses him of killing Dumbledore. Alan Rickman brilliantly conveyed Snape's inner conflict with just his expression. In the book, this scene is far more restrained. Harry is hidden under the invisibility cloak, and Snape is dueling other professors. Number 4. Death Eaters in the London Sky. Half-Blood Prince is notable for several new scenes that had no equivalent in the text. Instead of the book's meeting between the Muggle Prime Minister and the Minister for Magic, the film offers a much darker opening. Death Eaters fly over London, destroying bridges and spreading panic among the Muggles. Visually striking, even if it doesn't quite fit canon, the books make it clear Voldemort's followers couldn't actually fly like that. Number 5. Bellatrix Lestrange at the Burrow and the Astronomy Tower. Helena Bonham Carter embodied Bellatrix so naturally that the screenwriters couldn't resist giving her extra scenes. In Half-Blood Prince, Bellatrix appears in the burning of the Burrow and later in the attack on the Astronomy Tower. Neither of these existed in the book, but they added a darker, more suspenseful tone to the movie, balancing its otherwise romantic atmosphere. Number 6. Harry and Hermione's dance. One of the most unexpected moments in Deathly Hallows Part 1 is Harry and Hermione's dance in the tent. This scene was invented specifically for the film. 2 exhausted lost friends forget everything for a moment. Some see a hint of romance, others just 2 people trying to comfort each other. Either way, the scene adds depth to their bond and remains one of the most touching in the series. Number 7. Harry and the cafe waitress. Half-Blood Prince opens with an unusual scene. Harry sitting in a cafe, chatting flirtatiously with a young waitress. He even sets up a date, but the date never happens. Dumbledore suddenly appears and whisks Harry away to meet Slughorn. The scene is a lovely reminder that Harry is an ordinary teenage boy with his own hopes and dreams, not just a symbol of the fight against Voldemort. Number 8. Lupin and Harry talking on the bridge. Remus Lupin found Harry standing alone on the wooden bridge outside the Burrow. The dark fields stretched away into the cold mist. In the film, Deathly Hallows Part 1, Lupin's face looked older, the lines deeper. He told Harry in a low voice that Voldemort would come for him first. "You're the best hope we have," he said, his breath clouding in the air. For a moment, Harry didn't answer. He just gripped the railing as if steadying himself against the truth. In the book, their conversation had a different shape. Rowling wrote, Lupin looked angry, almost desperate. He pleaded with Harry to let him join their mission. He wanted to run from the guilt of leaving Tonks and the unborn child behind, but the film stripped away that argument and left only a quiet understanding between a mentor and a boy on the brink of war. No accusations, just sadness and respect. It was a softer version of Lupin, one who simply wanted to give Harry courage. Daniel Radcliffe and David Thewlis played the moment without a trace of melodrama. You could see Harry trying to gather the strength to lead. Lupin didn't pretend it would be easy. He laid a hand on Harry's shoulder, a silent blessing and apology. Then he walked away into the fog. It was the last time Harry saw him alive, a small, haunting scene that showed how much they had already lost before the fighting even began. Number 9. Neville's speech before the battle. Neville, Longbottom, stepped forward, his face pale but steady. Voldemort's voice curled through the ruined courtyard, promising mercy if they surrendered. All eyes turned to Harry's limp body in Hagrid's arms. Silence hung over the defenders of Hogwarts like a shroud. In that terrible quiet, Neville began to speak. The film Deathly Hallows Part 2 gave him words the book never did. He said simply, "I'll join you when hell freezes over." Then he turned to his friends. His voice rose. Harry's heart did beat for us, for all of us. In the book, Neville's courage showed differently. Rowling wrote, Then Neville moved forward, clumsy and brave and loyal. He attacked Nagini without a speech, his defiance a single, clean action. But the film chose a declaration instead, a speech that pulled the survivors back from despair. You could see Ginny Weasley's tears, the flicker of hope on Professor McGonagall's face. Neville was no longer the shy boy who once melted his toad's cauldron. Matthew Lewis's performance turned Neville into a hero. His voice cracked, but never wavered. Even Voldemort seemed unsettled by his conviction. In that moment, Neville stood taller than anyone. He reminded them all why they were fighting. When he drew the sword of Gryffindor, the entire courtyard seemed to hold its breath. The war was not over. And neither was Harry's story. Number 10. Hermione erases her parents' memory. Hermione stood behind her parents in their cozy living room. The television murmured. Sunlight caught the edge of the photo frames lining the mantel. She raised her wand, her hand trembling. In the film Deathly Hallows Part 1, this moment unfolded in painful detail. One whispered incantation, and the Grangers' memories began to slip away, the photographs in the frames blurred, Hermione's face fading like mist. She watched herself disappear, erasing every trace she had ever belonged. In the book, Rowling spared us this scene's agony. She wrote only, she had erased herself completely from her parents' memories for their own protection. A quiet fact tucked into a sentence. But the film chose to show what sacrifice really looked like. It was not heroic or grand. It was a daughter standing alone, giving up her family's love so they could survive. Emma Watson's expression was a portrait of heartbreak and determination. When the last photograph emptied, Hermione turned and walked away. No farewell, no way back. Her parents sat unmoved on the sofa, unaware of the loss. That was the price of joining Harry and Ron. Not just risking her life, but giving up the people who had loved her first. The film made sure no one could mistake how much she was willing to lose to defeat Voldemort. Number 11. Draco throws Harry his wand. The clash in the Great Hall was a storm of curses and screams. In the film, Harry stumbled across the rubble, unarmed and exposed. His wand was gone, lost in the chaos. For a moment it seemed the end had finally come. Then Draco Malfoy appeared in the smoke. He didn't say a word. His pale face looked strained, almost afraid. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed his own wand across the stones. The moment lasted only seconds, but it changed everything. In the book, Draco never took this risk. Rowling wrote, Draco was on the upper floor, white-faced, trying to pull his mother along. He was a boy, fleeing the wreckage of his family's choices. The film showed something braver, a silent gesture that said more than any apology. Draco didn't want Voldemort to win. He didn't want Harry to die. It was the first time he acted without fear of his father's shadow. This tiny act of defiance felt like a promise that Draco Malfoy could be more than a coward or a bully, that the boy who once sneered at Harry on the train had grown into someone capable of mercy. Fans still argue whether this scene was necessary, but in that flickering light, when Harry caught the wand, it was clear even the most unlikely person can choose to step away from darkness. Number 12. Harry snaps the Elder Wand. Harry held the Elder Wand in both hands. Its polished length looked almost innocent in the grey morning air. In the book, he returned it to Dumbledore's tomb without hesitation. Rowling wrote, Harry replaced the Elder Wand in the tomb, feeling that the Hallows should remain together. But the film chose a sharper ending. Instead of reverence, Harry broke the wand clean across his knee, a splintered relic of power that had ruined too many lives. Hermione watched him with wide eyes. Ron took a half-step forward, as if he might stop him. No one spoke. The crack echoed over the rubble. Harry's face didn't change. He looked down at the fragments, then let them fall into the chasm below. The shards disappeared into the mist, as final as any burial. It was a choice to end the story on his own terms. No more legends, no more temptation. This change divided fans. Some argued that snapping the wand was reckless. What if another dark wizard rose? What if its power could have been locked away? Others saw it as a declaration of freedom. Harry was done with destinies and symbols. He would never again be the master of anything but his own life. The film trusted the audience to understand that no victory would feel complete while the wand survived. Daniel Radcliffe's expression told the truth behind the scene: relief, exhaustion, and a fragile hope. He turned his back on the bridge, leaving the broken pieces behind. In that silent moment, Harry Potter stopped being the boy who lived. He became just Harry. And that was the most powerful ending of all. Number 13, Final Farewell on the Hogwarts Bridge. In the film's quiet aftermath, Harry Potter stood with Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger on the ruined bridge of Hogwarts. The stones still smouldered. The dawn painted the castle walls in soft gold. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Everything had been said in the long years behind them. In the book, there was no such moment. Rowling ended the battle with a simple line. The scar had not pained Harry for 19 years. All was well. But the film knew the audience needed one last glimpse of the trio as they were, before time swept them into adulthood. Harry's gaze moved over the broken towers and the dark forest beyond. He looked tired, older than his years. Hermione's hand found his without ceremony. Ron stood on his other side, silent and solemn. This was the price of victory. No celebration, only relief and the knowledge that nothing could ever be the same. You could almost hear the echoes of every loss. Sirius, Dumbledore, Lupin, Tonks, Fred. Their ghosts were still there in the cold morning light. Director David Yates held the camera steady on their faces. Daniel Radcliffe's expression said it all. Gratitude and sorrow and something like peace. Emma Watson's eyes shone with unshed tears. Rupert Grint swallowed hard as if he couldn't decide whether to smile or cry. It was a farewell to childhood as much as to war. For a moment, they were just three friends again, without prophecy or curses binding them. That final image burned into memory. Three figures standing side by side, ready to walk away at last. The book gave us a neat conclusion. The film gave us a pause, a breath, to remember what it cost them to survive. And in that pause, the story of the boy who lived found its quiet, perfect ending. Number 14, Fleur and Bill, during the attack on the wedding. When the Death Eaters crashed Bill and Fleur's wedding, in the film Deathly Hallows Part 1, the chaos unfolded with a strange kind of beauty. Among the screams and the dark figures tearing through the tent, Bill Weasley pulled Fleur Delacour into his arms. For a heartbeat, everything else faded. They held each other so tightly, it seemed their love alone was holding the collapsing world together. This was a moment the book never painted so vividly. In J.K. Rowling's words, the screams and yells seemed to fill the air completely, drowning the music and the laughter. There was no lingering camera, no tender embrace. In the novel, the attack happened fast, almost like a nightmare. Kingsley Shacklebolt's Patronus burst into the tent with the warning, "The Ministry has fallen, Scrimgeour is dead, they are coming." The guests barely had time to register the message before the protective charms were shattered. The darkness swept in, and the spellfire began. Bill and Fleur were there, of course, but Rowling's narration left their reactions to our imagination. The film decided not to. Director David Yates chose to highlight this couple's defiance. As curses exploded around them, Bill and Fleur clung to each other under the flickering chandelier. You could see Fleur's face buried in Bill's shoulder, her white wedding gown already smudged with ash. It was a wordless declaration. No matter how close Voldemort's shadow crept, they would not let it steal everything. This one small addition became a touchstone in the chaos. It reminded viewers that love was the thing worth fighting for. The book's version was raw, immediate, and terrifying. The film's vision let us watch two people make a silent promise in the middle of a storm. Number 15, McGonagall awakens the statues. Professor Minerva McGonagall stood in the entrance hall, her wand raised high. The air shivered with magic. In Deathly Hallows Part 2, she spoke a single incantation, Pietotum locomotor, and every stone knight lining the walls woke from centuries of stillness. They climbed down from their plinths, swords drawn, shields gleaming in the torchlight. McGonagall watched them march past with fierce satisfaction. She turned to Molly Weasley and said with a little smile, "I've always wanted to use that spell." In the book, Rowling described the castle's defense in simpler terms. Teachers and ghosts and prefects rose at once, and heads of house began to organize the evacuation. There were protective enchantments, magical barricades and charms, but the spectacle of animated statues was never mentioned. The film invented that image, hundreds of stone warriors marching in unison to defend the school. It was a moment designed for the screen, grand and unforgettable. Maggie Smith gave McGonagall a quiet joy in that scene. For all the danger, she allowed herself a flicker of delight. She was no longer only a teacher, she was a general, defending the last safe place her students had ever known. The camera lingered on her face as the statues thundered down the corridors. It was a reminder that courage can come with a touch of wonder. Outside, the giants were already tearing at the walls. The protective shield trembled overhead, but McGonagall's enchanted army met the darkness without hesitation. Stone arms swung heavy blades, shields locked into a solid wall. It felt as if Hogwarts itself had risen to fight. Every watcher knew this was a battle no one would forget. That single addition, Statues Come to Life, became one of the most iconic images in the entire series. It showed that even in the blackest hour, magic was not only destruction, it could be protection, loyalty, and hope. And it gave McGonagall one perfect moment to be exactly who she was meant to be. Number 16, Harry and Voldemort's Tower Dive. Harry Potter and Lord Voldemort collided on the highest parapet of Hogwarts. In the film Deathly Hallows Part 2, their duel became something more than a contest of wands. Voldemort's thin white fingers clamped over Harry's face. They grappled in a furious, tangled struggle. Then, without warning, they toppled into the air together. Their black robes snapped like wings. As they fell, their bodies blurred into a twisting shape of smoke and cloth. For an instant, it was impossible to tell them apart. The filmmakers turned this into a living metaphor. Harry and Voldemort were locked together by prophecy, by murder, by that fragment of soul neither had chosen. Their destinies wound so tightly that even gravity couldn't pull them apart. In the book, Rowling described their last duel in the Great Hall. Harry and Voldemort circled each other like wolves about to fight. Hundreds watched in silence. There were no leaps from towers, no shape-shifting clouds, just two men, wands raised, ready to end it. The simplicity of the moment made it solemn, almost sacred. The film took a different path. Director David Yates wanted spectacle. He wanted the audience to feel the story's final collision in their bones. When Harry and Voldemort slammed onto the stones far below, their bodies separated again. Voldemort's face twisted with shock. For the first time he looked truly afraid. Some fans felt the plunge was too theatrical. They missed the quiet power of the book. Others argued the scene captured something honest, the violence and chaos of this war, the way it had stolen any chance for a peaceful ending. In that fall you could see the ruin they had made of each other's lives. When they finally rose from the ground, it was almost a relief to watch them stand apart. No more illusions, no more shared shapes, just Harry and Tom Riddle, facing the truth that only one would walk away. Number 17, giant protective shield over Hogwarts. Professor McGonagall raised her wand to the sky. All around her, the other teachers did the same. In the film Deathly Hallows Part 2, streams of golden light burst upward and joined above Hogwarts. They formed a vast, shimmering dome. The shield glowed against the darkness, etched with moving lines of ancient runes. Students and Order members watched in silence as their last defense locked into place. In the book, Rowling described the castle's protections more simply. A multitude of spells and enchantments flowed from the castle itself. They were barriers you could not see. You only felt them, like a wall of invisible force. The film chose to make the magic visible, turning it into a spectacle of light and hope. It was the moment everyone knew the real battle had begun. When Voldemort stepped from the Forbidden Forest, his face was pale with triumph. He lifted the Elder Wand. The first strike came like thunder. The golden dome rippled under the impact, then it splintered, spiderweb cracks racing across the surface. Each blow made the shield groan, as if the castle were alive and in pain. You could see fear flicker in the defender's eyes. Even Professor Flitwick, so precise and unflappable, wavered for an instant. The protective magic began to fracture, falling in glinting shards that vanished before they hit the ground. It was a clear warning. Voldemort's power was beyond anything they had ever faced. Director David Yates used this image to show the stakes. Hogwarts was no longer an untouchable refuge. The Golden Shield was beautiful, but beauty was not enough to stop the Dark Lord. The moment the dome collapsed, the tension snapped like a wire. For a heartbeat, the courtyard was utterly still. Then Voldemort's voice echoed across the valley, promising death to all who stayed. The film gave the shield a shape and a sound, so that when it fell you felt the loss in your chest. Magic could protect them, but not forever. Number 18, Chase on the Tottenham Court Road Bridge. The night swallowed the skyline as Harry, Ron and Hermione sprinted onto the Lavender Bridge. In the film Deathly Hallows Part 1, their feet hammered the pavement. The traffic lights flashed red behind them. Death Eaters swooped overhead like shadows with burning wands. Sparks burst against the bridge rails. Muggle cars skidded to a halt. It felt as if all of London was holding its breath. This was a scene invented entirely for the screen. In the book, Rowling described their escape differently. They disapparated into the alleyway beyond the square. There were no screaming drivers or shattering glass. Just the silent snap of magic and the darkness swallowing them whole. The filmmakers wanted something that felt bigger, more frantic, a chase you couldn't look away from. Hermione grabbed Harry's arm, her hair whipping around her face. Ron yelled over the roar of traffic. The spells cracked past them in white arcs. A delivery truck spun sideways, blocking their path. They scrambled over the hood as another curse struck the ground behind them. The bridge seemed to stretch on forever. One Death Eater, his mask glinting, landed in front of them. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Then Harry shouted, "Stupefy!" The spell caught the attacker in the chest and hurled him backward into the railing. The impact rang like a bell. It was the closest the film came to showing how unprepared they really were. 3 teenagers against a legion. The visuals turned A Quiet Flight into a war zone. Director David Yates wanted the audience to feel no place was safe, not even the center of the Muggle world. It worked. The bridge became a stage for chaos. You could see how young Harry and his friends still were, breathless and terrified, their wands shaking in their hands. Some fans disliked the scene. They argued it broke the story's rules. That magic didn't work like this, that the trio wouldn't endanger Muggles so recklessly. Others loved the adrenaline. It was a reminder that Voldemort's reach could touch anyone, anywhere. As the bridge finally cleared behind them, Hermione pulled them into the shadows. One last blast of light slammed into the railing where Harry had stood seconds before. Then they vanished into the dark, hearts racing. For the first time, they understood that this war would leave no corner of the world untouched. Number 19. Fiendfyre in the Room of Requirement. The Room of Requirement shook as Crabbe raised his wand. In the film Deathly Hallows Part 2, his voice cracked with panic as he shouted, "Fiendfyre!" The air ignited. A wall of flames exploded across the piles of hidden treasures. At first, it looked like any fire. Then it reared up, forming the roaring head of a serpent. Its eyes glowed white-hot. In the book, Rowling's words were simpler. Crabbe had unleashed Fiendfyre, the most dangerous form of magic. She described it as a rolling wave of cursed fire that consumed everything in its path, but the movie turned it into something alive. The fire slithered over broken cabinets and skeletons of old furniture, hunting them with a mind of its own. Harry grabbed Draco Malfoy's arm as a burning dragon lunged over a mountain of wreckage. The heat smashed into them, stealing the air from their lungs. Ron clambered up a teetering shelf and shouted Hermione's name. She clutched the cup of Hufflepuff to her chest, her face white with terror. The snake of fire uncoiled and struck again. Its jaws closed over a stack of vanishing cabinets, shredding them to sparks. Every heartbeat was a choice, climb higher or be swallowed. Crabbe lost his footing and fell, his screams drowned by the roar. The fire rose over him in triumph. Director David Yates used this moment to show what real fear looked like. The cursed flames were unstoppable. No shield charm could hold them back. Harry's eyes were wide, reflecting the burning monsters as they twisted closer. For a moment you could almost believe the fire was Voldemort himself, furious, devouring everything it touched. When the trio and Draco finally reached the brooms, the fire was already clawing at the ceiling. Waves of molten gold and black heat tore the room apart. Harry looked back once. The serpent lunged toward them, jaws gaping. He kicked off the floor and they shot into the air. The scene ended in a rush of ash and wind. Below, Fiendfyre consumed the last hiding place Hogwarts had left. In that moment, every secret, every lost relic, turned to smoke. It was more than spectacle. It was the price of careless cruelty, and the moment the story reminded us how close Harry always was to losing everything. Number 20, Hermione transforms into Bellatrix. Hermione Granger held the goblet of Polyjuice potion with both hands. Her eyes were enormous behind the steam. In the film Deathly Hallows Part 2, she took a steadying breath and drank it down. Her face twisted, her bones cracking as her body changed shape. A heartbeat later, Bellatrix Lestrange stood in her place. The transformation was sudden and grotesque. The book only mentioned this moment in passing. Hermione had drunk Polyjuice potion and was now the double of Bellatrix. Rowling moved quickly to the next part of the plan, but the movie lingered. It wanted the audience to see Hermione's terror. You could tell Emma Watson was playing a girl desperate not to betray herself. Helena Bonham Carter took over the performance with wicked brilliance. She didn't just play Bellatrix. She played Hermione pretending to be Bellatrix. Every step was too careful, every glance too shy. She clutched her wand like it might explode. When she spoke, her voice wobbled in an odd, polite stammer. "Good morning," she squeaked in Bellatrix's throaty rasp. Ron and Griphook exchanged looks. The absurdity of it made the scene electric. Here was the most feared witch in Voldemort's ranks, moving like a schoolgirl who had lost her timetable. When they entered Gringotts, Helena's performance grew more daring. She tried to swagger, her chin lifting in a regal sneer, but her eyes kept darting around, never quite meeting the goblin's gaze. Each time she handed over Bellatrix's wand or recited a password, her hands shook. The contrast between her appearance and her fear created tension you could feel in your teeth. If the disguise failed, they would die in that marble hall. But if she overplayed it, the deception would crumble anyway. Every line was a risk, every breath a gamble. Director David Yates let the camera follow Helena's face in close-up. You saw the little flashes of Hermione underneath, the disgust, the nerves, the determination to succeed. It was a reminder that bravery sometimes looked ridiculous. The film also found room for humor. When Griphook corrected her tone, she tried again, deeper and crueler, her voice rumbling, "I wish to enter my vault." The goblins frowned, but nodded. Relief flickered across her stolen face. Fans loved this sequence because it gave Hermione a moment of vulnerability and triumph all at once. She was terrified, but did it anyway. That was her true strength, not her skill with spells, but her refusal to let fear stop her. As they finally reached the vault, the disguise almost fell apart. The tension was almost unbearable, but Hermione, inside Bellatrix's skin, lifted her chin and walked into the dark, determined to finish what she had started. Number 21. Voldemort feels the death of Horcruxes. Voldemort stood in the Forbidden Forest, his eyes fixed on the darkness between the trees. In Deathly Hallows Part 2, he pressed one long finger to the Elder Wand. His breath came ragged. When another Horcrux fell, the reaction was instant. His body jerked like he'd been struck. A hoarse scream ripped out of him. The book never showed this connection so vividly. Rowling wrote, he knew he would know if any more of his Horcruxes were gone. It was more of a slow-dawning and unwelcome realization, but the film decided he would feel each loss like a wound tearing open. Every time Harry and his friends destroyed a piece of his soul, Voldemort staggered. When the locket was smashed in the Forest of Dean, he doubled over. When Hufflepuff's cup perished under the basilisk fang, he clawed at the air. Each moment underscored how fragile he really was. Ralph Fiennes played it with raw ferocity. His face twisted, veins rising under the skin. He let out strangled gasps. It was a portrait of a creature half man, half ghost, being slowly unstitched. No dark wizard should have looked so vulnerable, but in that agony Voldemort became something pitiful. In the shattered courtyard, he sensed Nagini's peril. He turned sharply, his cloak swirling. A terrible rage flared in his red eyes. Even the Death Eaters took a step back. They were seeing the truth. Without his Horcruxes, he was mortal. The legend was cracking. When he returned to Hogwarts, he crossed the hall of shattered windows. Bats swirled above him, a storm of wings and screeches. He pressed his hand to the wall as though he might fall. Another Horcrux was gone. His scream shook the stones. The choice to show this pain was more than a flourish. It made Harry's mission feel real. Every victory struck Voldemort directly. The audience could count the losses by the way he withered. At the same time, it raised the stakes. If he sensed the destruction, he would come faster, fight harder, kill without hesitation. No more mistakes, no more arrogance, only a wounded animal backed into a corner. Bellatrix watched him with wide, fearful eyes. Even she seemed to wonder if he was slipping beyond control. For a moment, there was no devotion in her face, just doubt. When Voldemort hissed that Nagini must stay by his side, his voice cracked. The mighty Dark Lord sounded like a man begging his last friend not to leave. Director David Yates lit those scenes in sickly green. The forest and the castle seemed to close around Voldemort, as if the world itself was shrinking. Each scream reminded the audience that he was no god. He was just a man who had torn himself apart, a man now feeling every missing piece. By the time the final duel came, his power was thinned. His eyes were wild. He knew how much he had already lost. It made Harry's last stand feel inevitable. The boy who lived had outlasted every fragment of the monster, and the monster could feel it dying. Number 22, Evacuation of Students and Families from Hogwarts. In Deathly Hallows Part 2, Hogwarts was no longer just a school. It became a place of flight and fear. The camera moved through the torchlit corridors, showing students pressed against the walls. Some clutched hands, others sobbed into each other's robes. Professors barked instructions, voices taut with urgency. Professor Sprout ushered a line of first years toward the hidden passages. Her face was pale but firm. She kept one hand on a tiny boy's shoulder. Nearby, Madame Pomfrey guided a family through a stone archway shimmering with enchantment. Every step looked like the last chance to escape. In the book, Rowling wrote simply, "Families were being evacuated." She didn't linger on the images, but the film wanted you to feel the terror of that night. It showed mothers kissing their children's foreheads. It showed fathers gripping wands they had never planned to use. Seamus Finnegan ran past, shouting for Dean Thomas. His voice cracked. In a dark corner, Lavender Brown hugged Parvati Patil, so tightly it looked painful. They had always shared secrets and gossip. Now they were sharing the fear of dying. Ron and Hermione paused near the entrance to the Great Hall. For a moment, they watched the exodus in silence. Hermione's eyes glistened. "They shouldn't have to see this," she whispered. Ron swallowed. He didn't argue. McGonagall raised her wand to part the crowds, her voice ringing out, "This way! Stay in pairs!" She was the unbreakable center. Even as the walls shuddered under Voldemort's blows, she did not flinch. Neville helped a little girl with her shoes. He tied the laces with shaking fingers, then squeezed her hand. "You'll be safe now," he said. She nodded, though her lip was trembling. Filch limped by, dragging a reluctant Mrs. Norris in a sack. He looked bewildered, as though he'd never seen so many wizards moving in the same direction. For once, no one paid him any mind. Outside, the grounds glowed with flickering shields and defensive wards. Families poured across the lawns toward Hogsmeade. From the battlements, you could see the line of fleeing figures like ants. Aberforth Dumbledore stood by the secret passage behind Ariana's portrait. His lantern swung in his fist. "Keep moving!" he growled. He looked nothing like his brother, but in that hour he was the same kind of protector. One Muggle-born father pressed his daughter's wand into her hand. "Don't lose it," he said, voice cracking. "Don't forget who you are." Then he vanished through the doorway, tears on his cheeks. The film captured something the book only hinted at. The war was not just wands and curses. It was families ripped from their places, children forced to grow up in a single night. When the last group disappeared through the passage, McGonagall turned away. Her shoulders slumped for just a second. Then she lifted her chin and walked back toward the Great Hall. All that remained were those who would stay and fight, and the silence left behind by everyone who could not. Number 23, Harry talks to Lupin about his son. In Deathly Hallows, Part 2, the walls of Hogwarts trembled with distant explosions. Shadows moved across the broken flagstones. Harry turned a corner and stopped short. Remus Lupin stood there with Nymphadora Tonks. Their faces were pale but calm. For a moment it felt like the world held its breath. Harry looked at them, searching for something to say. He had faced death so many times, but this felt different. "Who will be godfather?" he asked, his voice low. The question sounded too small for the moment. Lupin smiled in a way that made him look impossibly young. "You, Harry," he said. No hesitation, just quiet certainty. Tonks watched them both with tired eyes. She was clutching his hand so tightly her knuckles were white. In the book, there was no time for this. Rowling only wrote, and Remus Lupin, his face pale and weary, was there beside Tonks. Later, Harry would learn about Teddy in a letter. But the film wanted us to see it firsthand. It wanted us to feel how much Lupin was leaving behind. Harry nodded, swallowing hard. He tried to smile back. He thought of Sirius, of the godfather he had lost. He thought of James and Lily. For a heartbeat, he felt like he was being handed a piece of their story. Tonks touched Lupin's arm. "We should go," she whispered. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. She looked at Harry as if memorizing his face. The camera lingered on Lupin's profile. You could see the exhaustion, the regret. But there was no fear. He had chosen this path long ago, to fight, even if it meant never coming home. Harry wanted to tell them to stay behind, to save themselves for the child waiting beyond the war, but he knew it would be useless. Lupin would never hide while others fought. The moment passed like a breath. Lupin straightened his shoulders. He gave Harry one last look, a look that held pride and apology all at once. Then he turned away, cloak billowing behind him. Tonks followed without a word. Their footsteps were soft against the stone, quieter than the thunder outside. When they were gone, Harry stood alone in the corridor. He pressed a hand to the wall, feeling it shake under Voldemort's assault. In that moment, he understood more clearly than ever what this war was costing them. It wasn't just lives, it was futures, families that would never be whole, children who would never remember their parents' faces. As he walked back toward the battle, he carried their choice with him. It was heavier than any curse, and when the time came to face death himself, he thought of Lupin's smile, a man who had lost everything but still found the courage to give hope to the next generation. Number 24, Duel in the Café on Tottenham Court Road. Rain streaked the windows of the café on Tottenham Court Road. Harry, Ron, and Hermione sat hunched over mugs of coffee, their eyes darting to the door each time it opened. In Deathly Hallows Part 1, this was their first moment alone after the wedding exploded into chaos. The hush didn't last. The bell over the entrance chimed. 2 Death Eaters stepped inside, their coats dripping. Their wands were already raised. A heartbeat of silence passed before Hermione gasped, "Run!" But there was nowhere to go. In the book, Rowling described it simply. They were in a small café. 2 men entered, and, before Harry knew what was happening, curses were flying. It was quick, almost casual. The film made it feel like a war zone. The first curse blasted the sugar canisters off the counter. Glass rained across the tiles. Ron shoved Harry behind a pillar just as a jet of green light cracked the air. Hermione dived for cover, her hair whipping behind her. Tables flew in all directions. Chairs shattered against the walls. For the first time, the trio had no safe house, no adult protection, just their wands and the instinct to survive. One Death Eater bellowed, "Avada Kedavra!" The spell splashed green against a metal pillar inches from Harry's head. He flung a stupefy back. It hit the man square in the chest, sending him sprawling over the counter. Hermione rose from behind an overturned table, her wand shaking. She screamed, "Petrificus totalis!" The second Death Eater stiffened and crashed to the floor, his eyes frozen wide. For a moment, only the hiss of the broken coffee machine filled the silence. Harry's heart was hammering so hard it hurt. He looked at Ron, who was bleeding from a cut on his cheek. Ron managed a ragged laugh. "Well," he said, voice unsteady, "that was subtle." Hermione didn't smile. She was staring at the door as if expecting more attackers. "We have to leave," she said. "Now!" The camera pulled back, showing the devastation. A place that had been warm and ordinary was wrecked. This was what the world had become overnight. No corner safe, no moment guaranteed. They stepped into the rain again, leaving the cafe behind like a broken shell. Harry didn't look back. He was starting to understand that nowhere was hidden anymore. Director David Yates filmed the scene in cold blue light. It felt stripped of all comfort. Even Muggle London seemed infected by Voldemort's shadow. And as they vanished into the wet streets, the cafe lay in ruins, proof that the war had found them, whether they were ready or not. Number 25. Death Eaters, burning the Burrow. Smoke curled over the fields where the Burrow had stood. The night sky glowed red. In half-blood prints, the film lingered on this devastation. Molly Weasley clutched Arthur's arm as the last flames devoured the crooked walls of their home. Her face was hollow with shock. In the book, this scene never happened. Rowling never burned the Burrow. Instead, it remained a sanctuary, a place where the Order gathered, and the children felt safe. But the filmmakers wanted something harsher. A reminder that Voldemort's reach could scorch anything, even a place built with love. Bellatrix Lestrange stalked away from the fire, her laughter high and bright. Greyback prowled behind her like a wolf waiting to feed. The orange glow lit their silhouettes. It was the shape of nightmare. Arthur pressed his lips to Molly's hair. His hand trembled on her shoulder. They didn't speak. What words could you find when your life turned to ash? Harry stood a few steps away, frozen. He had called this place home. He had eaten at that kitchen table, watched the clock on the wall mark every Weasley's path. Now it was all smoke and ruin. Ron turned his back on the wreckage. His shoulders were stiff. He wouldn't let anyone see the tears in his eyes. Ginny simply stared, her wand limp in her hand. Director David Yates filmed it without music. Just the crackle of burning timber. The silence made it worse, as if the world itself had gone still to witness what hate could do. Molly's voice finally broke the quiet. "It's only walls," she whispered. But the way she clung to Arthur said she didn't believe it. For Harry, it was the first true glimpse of what this war meant. Voldemort didn't have to kill you outright. He could take everything you loved and leave you standing in the wreckage. In the background, the firelight gleamed on Bellatrix's grin. Her delight was almost childish. She wanted them to know no place would be safe again. When the camera pulled back, the Burrow looked small against the night, a house of crooked walls reduced to embers. This single scene changed the tone of the story. It told the audience that no family, no matter how kind or humble, could escape the darkness rising. As dawn crept over the fields, Molly and Arthur still stood together. Their home was gone, but their arms were locked tight around each other. That was the only defense left to them, and in that moment Harry understood that love alone might not save you, but it was still worth everything you had to give. Number 26, Hogwarts in Flames. Scene number 26 in Deathly Hallows. Part 2 has often been remembered as one of the most visually arresting moments in the entire cinematic adaptation of J.K. Rowling's saga. The image of Hogwarts engulfed in flames, with its towers crumbling and embers drifting like dying stars into the black sky, is a spectacle that feels as inevitable as it is heartbreaking. The filmmakers, led by David Yates, chose to emphasize destruction on a grand scale, transforming the ancient castle into a battlefield whose wounds could never be fully healed. In contrast, the book's portrayal of the aftermath of Voldemort's siege, while grave, does not dwell on such graphic devastation. Instead, Rowling offers an understated depiction where the damage is profound yet leaves room for the idea that Hogwarts might one day be restored to its former sanctuary. The film's choice to show Hogwarts burning was no mere flourish of special effects, but a deliberate gesture to convey that no place, however enchanted, could survive the totality of war unscarred. The castle, for so long a symbol of refuge for Harry Potter and his friends, is presented in this scene as a monument to all they have lost. Watching the flames consume the turrets and send collapsing stones cascading into the Great Lake, the viewer cannot help but feel that childhood itself has come to an end. When the camera sweeps across the shattered courtyard, littered with rubble and broken suits of armor, it is as if the collective memories of every student who ever walked those corridors have been reduced to ash. In the novel, when Harry emerges from the pensieve after witnessing Snape's final memories, the narration simply says, "The castle grounds were as he had left them, the lake, still and dark, the smoking ruins of Hagrid's hut." There is no elaborate description of burning ramparts or collapsing towers, yet in the film, the sheer scale of the destruction seems determined to underline the horror of the war they have waged. Specific choices in the production design lend this vision of ruin an almost mythic dimension. The courtyard where Fred Weasley's body lies is spattered with embers and powdered stone, and the once polished floors have been fractured into jagged slabs. A piece of the astronomy tower topples in a roar of fire, sending debris smashing into the greenhouses below. While Rowling's text leaves the precise condition of the castle to the imagination, the film fills that silence with roaring conflagration and the charred remains of a place that once embodied hope. Neville Longbottom seen clutching. The sword of Gryffindor amid the wreckage becomes a figure of desperate resolve, surrounded by the flaming skeleton of everything he fought to defend. It is striking that in the book, even at the height of the siege, Hogwarts retains an aura of solemn endurance. In Chapter 31, The Battle of Hogwarts, McGonagall's transfigured statues and suits of armour march with unwavering purpose, and the defenders mount a resistance that seems to channel the castle's ancient power. When Harry later returns from the forest and walks into the Great Hall, the narrative emphasises the survivors more than the destruction. The survivors of the battle were gathered there, their faces turned toward the entrance. The film, however, sets aside restraint in favour of cinematic obliteration. It wants the viewer to feel that the castle itself is dying, that its legacy will be nothing but smoke. This artistic decision serves an emotional purpose. If Hogwarts is the beating heart of the series, a living symbol of belonging, then to see it burning is to understand in a single shot that the cost of Voldemort's reign is more than lives lost. It is the shattering of everything the wizarding world built to shelter its young. The camera lingers on the pyres of collapsed walls, as though forcing the audience to reckon with the fact that safety was always a fragile illusion. When the Gryffindor common room ignites and the painted tapestries shrivel, the film is telling us that no tradition is immune to ruin when evil becomes law. This theme is not as explicit in Rowling's prose. The final duel between Harry and Voldemort occurs in the Great Hall, surrounded by the living, not the smoking carcass of a demolished school. In the text, Voldemort's body lay face down, pale and thin, the snake-like pupils forever empty. The battle ends not with an image of apocalypse, but a quiet return to stillness. Yet the movie resists this calm. Its version of Hogwarts is a place that must be symbolically razed before it can be renewed. David Yates and his team seem to believe that audiences required visual confirmation that the old world had ended. There is something both honest and cruel in that choice. One can argue that this conflagration is an external manifestation of what the characters have endured internally. Hermione Granger, who once clung to the rules and routines of Hogwarts as a compass, now moves through the ruins like a soldier among the dead. Ron Weasley's face is stained with grime and sorrow as he picks his way over collapsed staircases that he and his brothers once raced along as boys. In that sense, the destruction of Hogwarts is not merely spectacle, it is a mirror to the loss of innocence. Childhood, in all its wonders and protections, lies buried under burning rubble. It is also a testament to the peculiar magic of cinema that a single image, a castle ablaze, can communicate a depth of feeling that paragraphs of description might only approach. When the flames consume the West Tower and the stonework caves in, the camera does not flinch. This relentless gaze demands that the viewer confront a bitter truth. Victory has not come without obliteration. Even when Voldemort falls, the victory feels Pyrrhic. The home that had cradled generations of witches and wizards has become a tomb for their dreams. In this context, the filmmaker's departure from the text achieves a kind of narrative clarity. The visual spectacle tells us unequivocally that nothing will ever be the same. Even if the castle is rebuilt brick by brick, the ghosts of that night will remain. When viewers remember the series, they may not recall every detail of every duel, but they will remember the sight of Hogwarts in flames. The symbolism is too potent to fade. Perhaps it is fitting that the filmmakers chose to set this destruction against Alexandre Desplat's mournful score. The music swells and breaks as the walls collapse, suggesting both the grief of farewell and the small, defiant hope that something might survive. It is here, among the embers, that Harry chooses to turn back toward Voldemort and finish what was begun in Godric's Hollow. In this sense, the ruin of Hogwarts becomes a crucible. Only by losing everything does Harry discover what he truly stands for. By comparison, the book preserves a measure of ambiguity. It allows readers to imagine that the damage, while severe, is not absolute. In The Flaw in the Plan, Rowling writes, "The castle was still and silent, the battle over at last. The absence of a detailed description of flame and collapse leaves space for the possibility of restoration." The film's scorched earth approach closes that door, at least temporarily. The imagery insists that no return to innocence is possible. It is worth noting that this divergence has been controversial among fans. Some feel that the spectacle of destruction in the film robs the finale of its quiet dignity. Others argue that it heightens the stakes and honors the scale of the sacrifice. Whatever one's perspective, the burning of Hogwarts is not easily forgotten. It represents a choice to show war as it truly is, an obliteration of cherished places as well as cherished lives. Specific examples underscore this interpretation. In one shot, the camera tracks past the remains of the Ravenclaw Tower, which lies in a heap of cracked stone and scorched timber. The blue banner of Rowena Ravenclaw hangs in tatters. Nearby, a corridor where Luna Lovegood once led Harry to the lost diadem is now an open wound in the side of the castle, the walls gutted by fire. These details ground the destruction in familiar places, turning architectural loss into personal grief. Another striking moment occurs when the bridge to the courtyard collapses under Death Eater spells, sending defenders plunging into the darkness below. The bridge, a recurring backdrop for moments of camaraderie, Harry and Hermione in their third year, Fred and George planning pranks, becomes a graveyard. The visual impact of that collapse exceeds anything described in the novel. It is a reminder that the past cannot be reclaimed. One might wonder whether this choice diminishes the enduring power of Hogwarts as a symbol, but perhaps it does the opposite. By reducing the castle to ruin, the film emphasizes that what made Hogwarts meaningful was never only its stones. The real magic lay in the community it sheltered, in the friendships that outlived every wall. The burning of the castle is a metaphor for the end of an era and the resilience that follows. Even the characters' reactions reflect this transformation. When Professor McGonagall surveys the smoking wreckage, her face is drawn but resolute. The woman who once defended the school with incantations now must accept that its survival depends on more than spells. Her silence in that moment speaks louder than any dialogue could. It is a silence of mourning, but also of endurance. The film's decision to close with the castle in twilight, lit by the last flickering fires, reinforces the idea that war consumes everything indiscriminately. In the book, there is a sense that the Great Hall remains a sanctuary even in defeat, but on screen that sanctuary is gone. The absence of safety is complete, and from that absence must come whatever new world the survivors will build. The visual destruction of Hogwarts also reframes the final battle between Harry and Voldemort. In the book, the duel takes place with witnesses surrounded by the living who will remember. In the film, the confrontation moves among the ruins, isolated and primal. The absence of the intact castle around them heightens the feeling that they are fighting for the soul of something already shattered. This is the genius and the cruelty of Scene 26. It strips away nostalgia and forces both characters and audience to acknowledge that victory cannot return what was lost. The safest place in the wizarding world has burned, and yet, by showing this loss so vividly, the film also reminds us that survival is measured not in walls preserved, but in spirits unbroken. Number 27, Harry throws away the resurrection stone. Harry Potter walked into the Forbidden Forest with the weight of the world upon his shoulders, the Elder Wand stolen from him in Malfoy Manor, the cloak folded away in his robes, and the resurrection stone turning cold in his hand. In J.K. Rowling's book, this moment is quiet but powerful. Harry doesn't fling the stone away in anger or defiance, but lets it fall from his fingers onto the leaf-strewn forest floor. The text says simply, he dropped it. The act is as unassuming as it is monumental, showing that Harry rejects the temptation to see his parents, Sirius Lupin, again. He refuses to carry the stone to Voldemort. This tiny, almost invisible gesture is a renunciation of power and desire, a profound acceptance of mortality and sacrifice that defines Harry's arc. In the film adaptation of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, this same moment is heightened and dramatized, reframed for the visual medium. Instead of a quiet dropping, Harry opens his fist deliberately, looks at the stone with conflicted eyes, and hurls it into the darkness between the trees. The camera lingers on his face, tight with decision, and the sound of the stone clattering away is absent. Its finality is signaled instead by the echo of his resolve. This difference, though subtle, is deeply meaningful. The film's Harry is shown consciously and forcefully rejecting the stone, making a spectacle of his refusal to seek solace in ghosts. The audience watches him make this choice with full awareness of what he's giving up. This cinematic choice exposes Harry's evolution from a boy desperate to see his dead parents in the mirror of erasure to a man who accepts their loss and stands alone. It's an embodiment of Dumbledore's lessons, especially the conversation in Half-Blood Prince, where Dumbledore warns against the lure of the resurrection stone, noting that the second brother in the tale of the three brothers killed himself after realizing he could not truly bring his beloved back. Harry has learned that lesson, not through abstract philosophy, but through unbearable grief, watching so many friends die for him. By rejecting the stone, he refuses to repeat that ancient tragic mistake. In Rowling's book, the act is stripped of spectacle because Harry himself has been stripped of pretense. He knows he will die. He knows Voldemort's plan depends on killing the part of his soul within Harry. There is no more bargaining or tricks left. The simplicity of "he dropped it" is brutally honest, mirroring his surrender to death itself. As the narrative says, he pressed the golden snitch to his lips and whispered, "I am about to die." That statement is the price of the stone's opening. Harry must confess mortality before magic will yield its last secret. It is one of the rawest moments in the entire saga. Contrast that with the film, which needs to show us the decision with movement, sound, expression. The act of throwing the stone is cathartic for the viewer, a symbolic purging. By casting it away, Harry severs his last emotional crutch. It's not simply dropping it by accident or allowing it to slip unnoticed. He denies himself the one easy path left, to keep the stone in his pocket and call on his parents as he walks to his death. This choice honors their sacrifice, refusing to exploit their love even in his final moments. The narrative weight of this scene is enhanced by everything that has come before. Harry's relationship with death has always been central to the series. He's the boy who lived because he survived death once before. He's spent years grappling with the deaths of his parents, Cedric Diggory, Sirius Black, Dumbledore, and finally Fred, Remus, and Tonks. By the time he opens the snitch, he's carrying all of them inside him. The Resurrection Stone offers him an easy reunion, but it's a lie. As Dumbledore told the tale, the second brother's insolent demand for life back from death ended in tragedy because the woman he brought back was cold and sad. Harry knows better. This understanding is why, even before he uses the stone, he knows he cannot keep it. He summons his parents, Sirius, Lupin, ghostly guides to his final steps. Rowling writes, they were neither ghost nor truly flesh, less substantial than living humans, but much more than ghosts. They are his past, his love, his courage, but they cannot save him from Voldemort. They cannot die in his place, and Harry sees it. When they promise to stay with him until the end, it is not because the stone has truly restored them, but because his memory and love make them real enough. Once that moment passes, he no longer needs the stone.